the chair of the Gun Violence Prevention Group at the Fallen Church. I hope you'll find today's program interesting and inspiring. I'd like to thank the panelists for giving so generously of their time today to be here. And Temple Amuna for making this wonderful space available for our use. Special thanks to Roberta Wilson, coordinating the event. Thanks to the members of the Gun Violence Prevention Group, who helped to put this program together. And especially thanks to Stan Griffith. He and I together came up with the idea for this event. Thanks to our co-sponsors and the many people in town who have come forward to support this program over the last 6 weeks. Finally, I'd like to thank the members of Lexington Says Enough. You inspire us all. Now I'd like to introduce your host, Rabbi Lerner, and then your moderator, Reverend Claire Feingold-Thoren. Rabbi Lerner has been a rabbi at Temple Amuna for 14 years. He has been a leader in gun violence prevention for many years in his congregation in the Lexington area and nationally. He founded Clergy Against Bullets and has been on the board of Faiths United Against Gun Violence, where he successfully lobbied then Senator Scott Brown to vote against conceal and carry reciprocity. As president of the Massachusetts Board of Rabbis from 2015 to 2017, he built bridges with other faith communities and advanced an agenda that united the Jewish community beyond gun violence prevention. And I'm also very pleased to introduce the much-loved minister of the Fallen Church, Reverend Claire Feingold-Thoren. My minister, who will serve as moderator for this forum. She has been our parish minister for 5 years. Previously, she served as associate minister of the First Parish Church in Lincoln. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you to Reverend Claire Feingold-Thoren, the Fallen Church, to Lexington Says Enough, and the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute, and all the co-sponsors who are listed in your program, and all those involved in organizing this most important afternoon. We here at Temple Amuna are proud to host this event and honored to be your partners in this holy work, the work of saving lives. For those of us who have been working tirelessly to prevent gun violence for decades, the last years have been disheartening. Surely after Columbine, Virginia Tech, Tucson, Fort Hood, Aurora, Oak Creek, surely after Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut, something would change. But nothing. The NRA's chokehold was too strong. Orlando, Las Vegas, South Sutherland, Texas, nothing. But after Parkland, Florida, our young people have risen to the fore, demanding change. Our students are saying enough. The school walkouts, the March for Our Lives speak to the winds of change. And just 2 days ago, a federal judge held up our Commonwealth's ban on assault rifles. And kudos to our Attorney General. And in that effort, kudos to our Attorney General, from whom we will hear from later on. This is a moment when we can save lives. This is a moment when we can affect change. Let us not squander the moment, but learn and act. The ancient rabbis taught, if you save just one life, it is as if you have saved the world. So let's do that. Enough of doing nothing. The Hebrew Bible states clearly, Do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. Commenting on this commandment, Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra warns against the complicity of silence and its price. Concerned about the danger of weapons falling into the wrong hands and to prevent arms trafficking, the ancient rabbis set strict guidelines, not only for the sale of weapons, but also for the sale of material that could be used to make weapons. 2,000 years ago, the rabbis were not afraid to limit the sale of weapons, nor should we be today. Today, there are virtually no limits to the weapons and accessories that can be purchased legally in the United States. Through online sales, gun shows, and private sales, in particular, shooters can purchase assault rifles, bump stocks, gas canisters, explosives, and thousands of rounds of ammunition. Why would any private citizen need such weaponry? And why is amassing such an arsenal legal? Almost all Americans agree that there should be universal background checks. Why is that not the law of the land? Enough, or as we like to say in Hebrew around Passover time, enough. While we hear about mass shootings, most people are killed by guns in smaller numbers. Each day, on average, 318 people are shot in this country, and 96 of them die each and every day. 7 of those murdered are children. Enough. Let us all be agents of change. And to paraphrase the words of Captain John Parker on April 19, 1775, on the battle green just down the road, let this change begin right here in Lexington. Thank you.
Good afternoon. One more reminder to turn off your cell phones if you just got here. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Rabbi Lerner. This is an amazing group that has gathered here before us to speak on the subject of preventing gun violence. I'd like to give you a little background on each of them before we turn the floor over. Chaplain Clementina Sherry founded the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute in memory of her 15-year-old son, Louis, who was shot to death in 1993 while he was on his way to a Teens Against Gang Violence meeting. She has served families of murder victims for over 2 decades and has trained thousands of public health professionals, law enforcement officials, and religious leaders in the best practices for supporting survivors and interrupting cycles of retaliatory violence. Internationally known, she is an ordained chaplain and a Lady of the Order of St. Gregory, the Great, the highest honor bestowed by Pope John Paul II on a lay Catholic. She holds honorary degrees from 3 area colleges and is the author of 2 books. Chaplain Sherry was chosen as a 2017 Bar Fellow for her effective, visionary, and collaborative leadership and capacity to motivate others, drive change, and produce results. Michael McMillan is a community activist from Jamaica Plain. In 2008, he lost a close friend to gun violence. He is the founder of Max Souls, a nonprofit that distributes clothing and footwear and other essentials to people in need. Its mission is to promote positive connections throughout the community through the process of giving. Emily Weinberg is a sophomore at Lexington High School. She was the founder of Lexington Says Enough, a student group demanding action to make schools safer from gun-related violence. Since the Parkland shootings, members of the group have been active on many fronts, walking out of school, marching, and supporting Boston students in a lobbying effort at the State House. I've Attorney General Maura Healey has become a national leader among state attorney generals, joining suits to overturn federal actions. Before she was elected in 2014, she served as chief of the Civil Rights Division in the Attorney General's office, where she spearheaded the state's challenge to the Federal Defense of Marriage Act. As Attorney General, Ms. Healey has issued a comprehensive 3-point plan on reducing gun violence in Massachusetts by addressing the root causes of violence, by keeping guns out of dangerous hands, and by taking on new challenges with proactive planning and new technology. Before I turn the podium over to our first speaker, Chaplain Sherry, I'd like to remind you we'll be taking questions from the audience later in the program. And you have each received a 3x5 card in your program. There are pencils in each row of seats. So as a question comes to you, please write your question down on your 3x5 card, identify who you would like it to be addressed to, and pass it toward the center aisle. Our ushers will be coming down the aisles periodically to collect the cards. And now, without further ado, Chaplain Sherry.
Good afternoon. I bring you greetings from Dorchester, Massachusetts. Thank you so much for really extending your arms and inviting us to be a part of this important day. I'd like to start off with a quote from Dr. Deborah Prothro-Sitz. She says, "Violence is not the problem of one neighborhood or group, and the response and solutions are not the responsibility of one sector of the community or one agency, professional group, or business. Coming together and owning this problem and the solutions are central." This is an example of coming together and owning the problem. I was re-energized with hope after the weekend of action across the country by the young people with a goal of creating and sustaining communities that are free from gun violence. The Peace Institute has been working towards that vision since the murder of my 15-year-old son, Louis, 24 years ago. Louis was a young champion of peace who, like so many young people, in the streets that weekend on March 24th. Louis and his friends were tired of seeing his peers end up dead, addicted to drugs, deported, or in jail. He believed, as we believe, that teenagers have the power to make monumental change, and we've seen again and again throughout histories. Thank you to Michael and to Emily. I am honored in sharing the stage with you. I am moved by the principle of unity as I see so many youth from different colors, culture, and community coming together to address the issue of gun violence that continues to destroy families on both ends. I want to amplify the leaders of survivors of colors because Black and brown people are truly most impacted by both homicide and by the criminalization of gun ownership. Without recognizing that racism is a root cause of violence, this country, we cannot heal from open wounds. We mourn all victims, from Parkland to Sandy Hook to Columbine to Dorchester, and we acknowledge the pain and anger that families are feeling. All families of homicide victims deserve to be treated with dignity and compassion, whether their loved one was murdered in school, at a rally, a concert, a movie theater, on a street corner, or by the police. We will strengthen our movement by rejecting the idea that only some victims are worthy of our grief, leaving others to be overlooked and forgotten. I know that we can support the demands of the young people and also the demands of young people of color, even when they might be hard to hear. The movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter protests have been happening since Trayvon Martin was murdered in 2012 and have shaped the young people who are a part of the March for Our Lives. At the Peace Institute, we offer crisis management services to families of murdered victims in the immediate aftermath of their loved one's murder. This kind of emotional and practical support really helps to reduce acts of retaliatory violence by meeting families' immediate and emotional needs, and by helping them process the intense feelings of pain and anger and their thirst for revenge. In the comfort and privacy of the Peace Institute, our advocates work with families to spread the message of love, unity, faith, hope, courage, and forgiveness after their loved one's murder. Our advocates also focus on the survivor's rate. In addition to the homicide rate, when a person is murdered, at least 10 immediate family members are directly affected. These numbers do not include extended families, friends, co-workers, and neighbors. Nor do these numbers include the family on the other side of the gun. As we continue to work towards peace while addressing the issue of gun violence, what are we doing for the families of those who have already experienced the violence? While the homicide rate may reset every year, when a person loved is murdered, we are still dealing with the grief and the trauma for the rest of our lives. How many of you know of someone who has been murdered? Or how many of you know of someone who's been in prison for murder? We are all impacted. While we do the noble and worthy work of reforming gun laws and addressing the flow of guns into the community, we have to recognize that homicide continues. The Peace Institute was very instrumental, with Massachusetts having the strictest gun laws in the country, and yet gun violence continues to impact my community. While we are not experiencing school shooting here in our state, and we are blessed, the rate of survivorship is still on the rise. As advocates, activists, providers, faith leaders, business and community leaders, we need to push our elected officials to have coordinated, consistent, and compassionate homicide response in place, whether it is street shootings, gang shootings, school shootings, or theater shootings. We're committed to serving these families and working with partners and allies around the country to ensure that they have equitable and effective response in place no matter where. I really want to close out with you to let you know that an equitable and effective homicide response is also a racial justice issue. Homicide disproportionately impacts Black families. The solutions to the crisis of gun death are not simply limited to legislative change. We need a cultural transformation. True peace is only possible when all families, regardless of the circumstances, are treated with dignity and compassion. One way to take action locally and support the survivors' community is to truly invest in the tools that we have developed to assist families. Invest in the Survivors Veteran and Resource Guide and equip your local hospitals, your law enforcement, and your church. So when a homicide does happen, that family is not left to be alone. Invest in the Always in My Heart and workbook for grieving children. Equip the teachers. Equip the community centers. Equip the schools, especially those of you whose children from the urban settings are coming in to your community. So when a homicide does happen, those young people are not left alone. Join us in the Mother's Day Walk for Peace. Go to our website and download our Pathways to Peace so you are teaching social-emotional learning to the young people. I close with a quote by Dr. Scott Peck, an American psychologist and the author of The Road Less Traveled. He states, "Community is a group of individuals who have learned how to communicate honestly with each other, whose relationships go deeper than their massive composure, and who have developed a significant commitment to rejoice together, mourn together, and to delight in each other, and make others' conditions our own." I want to thank you to this community, to the Fallen Community Church, Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, and the organizers for inviting us into your community and for making our conditions your own. I leave you in peace.
hell.
Afternoon, everybody. First of all, good afternoon again. Thank you. So once again, I want to thank the organizers that brought everybody in this room together, the panel included. Again, I want to thank the church for hosting us as well, and just thank everybody for the opportunity just to be here. So also I want to share a quote that one of my mentors shared with me a while back, and it really stuck with me. And the quote is, privileged people don't understand how privileged they are, and poor people don't understand how important the choices that they make in life are. And so that right there really stuck with me, and so here's a reason why. So I come from a community that's been plagued with gun violence for as long as I can remember. Back in 3rd grade, I seen my first instance of gun violence, and then by the time I was in 8th grade, I've been shot at. And more particularly, I was shot at with a group of my friends that we were in middle school at the time, and I'm gonna get to 2 particular individuals that really had an impact in my life. One by the name of John Silva, and the other one's name is Thomas Webb. So with that, Thomas was 15 years old, I was 14, and John Silva was 13. And so in this particular time, back in middle school, we were shot at in the late afternoon in back of his grandmother's house in my neighborhood. And so it kind of really scared us to death, where that was my first stint of ever being shot at. I had heard gunshots living in this community. I had known of people getting shot, but I had never really seen somebody shoot at me. And so that was really scaring and paralyzing for myself, also for John Silva, and then also for Thomas Webb. And so just keep those 2 names, especially John Silva, in the back of your mind. So fast forward 2 years later, my friend Thomas Webb, who were a victim of gun violence 2 years before that, he gets killed in our neighborhood. And so Thomas Webb at this time is 17 years old. He doesn't graduate high school. There's so much dreams and ambitions that Thomas wanted to fulfill that he never got the opportunity that I'm so lucky to have. And just little things such as graduating, be able to interact with my friends and things like that we kind of take for granted. And so that kind of really it shook me to my core, because just a couple of years ago we were dodging bullets. Now bullets were killing my friends. And so that really hurt myself, and it also hurt John Silva more particularly. I remember also when it happened, my first thought was I wanted a gun. And so a lot of the times, I wanted a gun more so for protection, because after seeing my friend get killed, after being shot at, after seeing my friend get killed, it really did something to me that I wasn't able to explain as I was a kid. Many of these kids in these communities go through issues such as PTSD that doesn't get talked about, and the trauma that really hits home for us that we can't sit there and explain. Sometimes we suppress these memories with drugs, alcohol, and things like that, and it destroys the foundation of our community, and it destroys the people. And so one particular time, John Silver, last year he was locked up on his 2nd gun charge. And so in this particular time, there was an article that the Boston police had shared with about John Silver, about him being locked up with his 2nd gun charge. And a lot of people were criticizing John Silver, a childhood friend that I really grew up with since I was a kid, really, in a sense. And so it kind of made me upset that people were calling him a gangbanger, a savage, or that he deserves to be locked up, really without looking at John's full body of life and wondering what makes a man or individual want to pick up a gun and carry a gun, things like that. And so in this particular time, I was able to write John a couple of messages back and forth, a letter, and he basically sent me a letter last year that he wanted me to speak when I had the opportunity to. And so I want to share the letter with you guys. He titles it John Silva, From Past to Present. I'm a young man who made some bad decisions. These decisions that I made got me to where I'm at today. I'm currently sitting in a cell in Nashua Street in jail, waiting on my 2nd gun charge. Boston police and many others have labeled me as a savage, gang member, or a menace to society, where they don't know the real me and what I've been through. As a young kid growing up in brown meat housing projects, life was tough. I didn't have what what some people will call the perfect life. I had to work for things that I needed. I was a good kid going to school. I had good grades and I stayed out of trouble. But my life took a turn for the worse when one of my closest friends, Thomas Webb, was gunned down at the age of 17, a block away from where we lived. Growing up in Bromley, there was always random shootings. There were days where you heard shots and prayed no one that you knew was on the wrong end of the barrel. I never thought this day would come for Thomas and the man above to meet this way. That day changed my life forever. At that day, nothing else mattered. I started losing focus in school, grades started slipping, I was mentally unstable. All I kept thinking about was if it could happen to him, it could happen to me. So I started carrying a gun. I had no intentions of using it, I wanted to defend myself. I told people I'd rather have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. So to be labeled as a savage, a gang member, or menace to society because I carried a gun to protect the lives that others were trying to steal from me is crazy. No one knows what I've been through, so how could anyone judge me? I think about Thomas and the decisions I made every day, but just like I can't change what happened to him, I can't change the decisions that I already made. So therefore, you could judge someone. So therefore, before you judge someone, just sit for a second and think about what happens to that person and what they've been through, and why they are the person they are today. One thing could change a person's life forever. And so the reason I share that with you guys, so it can be a little more detailed and more discreet, to where I'm up here speaking to you guys, but this is the negative side of the effect that happens when people are affected by violence, where they potentially get a gun and now they start making choices that they don't know how important it's going to affect their life down the long road. And these are the choices that a lot of us made. I was fortunate enough not to get my hands on a gun. Basketball was my outlet, so I was able to use basketball as my escape. Where a lot of my friends, they didn't have the talent or per se the gift or people scouted them out. They were still stuck in that environment, so a lot of times you have to adapt to that environment, and we're going to adapt to the environment the best the way we know how. It may be wrong, but we're going to adapt and we're going to survive. Just as much as the kids in school, their lives matter. Community, the youth in our community also matter. You can't talk about school safety without talking community safety. If there's no kids in the school is not valuable. You got to make sure the kids get there first, and then also before that, you got to make sure that the kids have a stable mind to get there. There was one particular line that John wrote that really stuck with me as well. And he talked about the reason he got it done is because he wanted to protect the lives around him. And for me, it just showed how selfish he was, where I feel like I felt the same way, but sometimes you're not eager to go that extra step, knowing that in your mind you want to. And so sometimes there's other friends out there that's going to take the fall. And when I say take the fall, there's going to be other friends out there that's not gonna want you to mess up or go that direction. And so rather you go that direction, they're gonna step up and do what they feel like is necessary to protect their friends. And that's what John did. And that's really it's hurtful to talk about John, to talk about Thomas, but it's also a reminder that we got a lot of work to do. And as a community, I feel like we can do great things. It doesn't start with me and it doesn't end with me. Everybody in this room, we have enough power to use our voice and to move people, especially the young folks that really don't know what's happening in these communities. We have to start speaking up and just really start educating ourselves. And before you judge somebody, get to know them. A lot of us already, we label people before we get to know them. We put them in a box that they may personally don't fit in. A lot of us don't fit in these boxes that people want to put us in a label. And so I just be open-minded to everything, and that's really about it. And I guess my last thing I want to tell you, so Thomas's birthday will be coming up soon on April 10th, and so this is another opportunity. I want to wish my friend a happy birthday, and I'm just so happy I can get his story out here. And just so I want to wish him a happy birthday. He has a twin sister who she'll be 27. So Thomas passed away at 17, and he'll be 27 in a couple of days. And so I think about that a lot. He also has a newborn nephew that was born April 4th, and so that's something that's really on my mind right now. Thomas's father celebrated a birthday April 5th. He just turned 70 years old, and so for 10 years he hasn't been able to see his son, oldest son, but he's been able to see me. And I hope I've been doing justice in his son's name and bringing awareness to the situations that's really affecting everybody. And just thank you guys for the opportunity to be here with such amazing panel. And great folks as yourself. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Michael, for that moving story. I'd like to remind everyone to pass your questions on 3x5 cards towards the center aisle where the ushers will pick them up. And I'm going to stick with the order on the program. And so I'd like to introduce Attorney General Maura Healey.
Thank you so much, Reverend Claire. It's really, really good to be here this afternoon with all of you. To the members of the Fallen Community Church, thank you for all that you've done in organizing today. My good friend Tina Cherry, to Stan Griffin and Grady, everyone who's here. It's a good place to be this afternoon. Rabbi Lerner, thank you so much for opening this beautiful temple up to all of us today. And I want to especially thank Emily and Michael for their words and for their presence. Yesterday, as you may have seen, there were students from all across Massachusetts who were out at events, at town halls, caring for what really is a tremendously powerful movement right now. And you have a voice, you're using your voice. We think about Thomas, we think about your powerful message, Michael, and that's what this is all about. So let's give a hand to our young people. So, I'm going to cut to a few things right now as I speak. The first is that fundamentally this is a public health issue. For far too long, we've talked about this as a public safety issue, which it is. We've talked about this as a constitutional issue, which it is. But let's be clear, with the number of lives taken every day, with the number of injuries, with the number of families and communities forever altered and devastated, Tina has spoken and written so beautifully about the cycles of trauma, the cycles of violence. You just heard Michael speak to that. This is a public health issue, and it commands and demands a public health response. The second thing is that I think what Friday's decision from a United States Federal District Court judge made clear, as he cited extensively from current Supreme Court precedent, the Heller decision authored by Justice Scalia, protections go hand in hand with Second Amendment rights. It's as simple as that. Though many want to dispute that, I think that that's what was particularly heartening in Friday's decision. And finally, I think it's important to affirm what was just spoken to a moment ago, and that is the power of the people within this room. There are so many ways that we have agency, each of us, in this, and I think in this time right now, we need to find a way to exercise that agency and take hold of opportunity in a moment to bring about real change that is so long overdue in this country. I think about this moment, and I think about the number of parents that I've spoken with who think about the questions posed to them by their 6- and 7-year-olds when they return from school having participated in active shooter drills. Something I didn't grow up with as a young child, but that is the norm, of course, for students all across our state. How do you explain that to a young child? This is about the courageous and outstanding young people. We see the students from Parkland. We see the students who spoke at the march a couple of weeks ago in D.C. I had an opportunity to be down there from all over this country, Chicago, South Central, here in Boston, all across Massachusetts, from Lexington to Lowell to Worcester, out yesterday speaking up. In the words of one of my co-panelists today, Emily, who you'll hear from, she said that this movement has allowed me to find a voice that I never knew I had. And we see young people with their voice, using their voice in the most powerful of ways. And it's sort of a sad commentary that it takes young people to get adults to act. But it is indeed up to all of us to follow their lead. Because this isn't the America that many of us grew up in. You know, it's just not acceptable. And as you look around this country, as you look around this world and you compare rates of violence and gun violence, it's just unacceptable. And these young people know full well that thoughts and prayers don't cut it. Action is needed, and that's what today is about. They also know that this isn't just about school shootings. Though the recent event in Parkland brought once again to the fore the issue of school safety, this is an issue that covers our entire communities. Last night, of course, in Dorchester, a young man was shot and killed. So every day, communities all across this country experience violence, gun violence. And it's time for us to do something. The facts are clear. Strong gun laws do save more lives. Universal background checks and red flag laws save lives. Banning large capacity magazines and assault weapons can save lives. And 2 days ago, when we won a huge victory for everyone who wants to save lives in Massachusetts, we were really heartened to see the court affirm on constitutional principles that, first of all, the gun lobby's challenge to our enforcement was to be rejected, and that large capacity magazines and assault weapons are not protected by the Second Amendment. And I was really pleased about that, because it is my view that weapons of war and military-style weapons don't belong in the hands of civilians. I was also really pleased that the court affirmed the prerogative and the right of me to do my job as your Attorney General and enforce Massachusetts gun laws that are on the books here in this state. I have done that, and I will continue to do that. So Friday was a win for Massachusetts, a win for families across this state and across this country who are tired, sick and tired of the gun lobby spreading through a campaign of misinformation and disinformation, terrible things, and also attempting to write the rules for the rest of us. You know, Massachusetts has one of the lowest rates of gun deaths in America. It's no accident. We have strong laws and we enforce them. But that assault weapons ban, remember, came to be in 1998. It was signed into law by a Democratic legislature and a Republican governor. And it's just one piece of a series of comprehensive reforms undertaken to make our communities a little safer. Now, within the last few years alone, because of the efforts of the gun lobby, many of those laws have been challenged, and it's been my office's responsibility to defend those laws, and I'm really glad that we've been successful in court defending those laws. Laws that prevent people with felonies, or a firearms-related conviction, or a history of domestic violence from getting a license to carry. I was challenged here in Massachusetts recently, and once again, the court upheld those laws as constitutional and our ability to enforce those laws. We stood up for the right of police chiefs who are so well situated to understand and know the needs within their community, to determine whether someone in their community is fit to carry a gun. Again, the gun lobby challenged that law. We were successful in upholding it here in Massachusetts. Now, when I took office in 2015, one of the things we did early on was to send a letter out to every single gun dealer in the state, telling dealers exactly what the laws required in making it clear that we would be watching, we would be paying attention. Since then, we have followed up with investigations and actions. We're making sure that dealers are conducting thorough background checks, doing the right record keeping, and not selling certain guns that are banned from sale here in Massachusetts. We've also had a team of investigators in my office, working with prosecutors focused on stopping the illegal trafficking of guns into and around our state. Those partnerships are vital, particularly the ones that exist across communities and cross state lines, because in Massachusetts, more than half the guns that are seized in criminal investigations come from outside our borders. But that's why this national effort is so important. Over the last 2 years, I've seen so many and met so many wonderful people who've dedicated their lives to ending violence in all forms in Massachusetts and across this country. Mothers and fathers and siblings and sons and daughters who've lost loved ones to the most unimaginable tragedy, and who are nevertheless working every day so that other people's kids can be safe. I think about my friend Mark Barden and Nicole Hockley, two parents from Newtown. I see a Newtown shirt from the march last week. They're doing amazing work, and one of the things that we've supported them doing here in Massachusetts is a pilot project in our schools to help identify kids who are having difficulty experiencing alienation, bullying, and the like, and taking efforts, particularly from a health and wellness and mental health perspective, to work with young people. I think about my friend Christine Lyonen. She's a former state trooper who lost her only son to the Pulse nightclub shooting 2 years ago in Orlando. I think about Tina Cherry, who lost her son and wants every neighborhood in Boston and across Massachusetts to be safe from senseless violence. I know that people are paying attention to what we're doing here in Massachusetts. This morning I received a telephone call from Mark Kelly, Congresswoman Gabby Gifford's husband. And he was so heartened by the court decision Friday, but more broadly, he was speaking to the leadership here in Massachusetts. Not from elected officials, I think that's important, but from the actions and the engagement of everyday people in cities and towns across this state. Others in the country are looking to us for finding out about what is working. There's a lot more work to do here in Massachusetts, to be sure. But I just want to thank you for coming out, because I think that our being strong together, continuing to stand together for basic public health, basic public safety, and gun sense is where we've got to be. Now, my final comment on the young people, I have to say I've been blown away having engaged with many of them in DC, here in Boston, and they have a wonderful voice right now. And it's given me tremendous hope and optimism. But I also know that they need allies. They need allies. They need an ally who can go to court with them. They need allies who can march with them. They need allies who can stand up to the powerful interests of the gun lobby and make the right consumer purchasing decisions and make the right decisions about where their investments are going to go, where their pensions are going to go. They need allies. And the great thing as I look out across this room is we've got a lot of allies here among us. So I wish everybody continued resilience and resolve, and know that my office and I will be with you every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Emily Weinberg.
Thank you, Reverend Claire. Hi, I'm Emily. I'm 16. I want to say thank you to Maura Healy, Michael, and Tina. And I feel honored to be up here speaking in front of you. And also being on the same stage as both of you, all of you. So your stories are so painful and so important for everyone to hear. No one's story should go unheard. Thank you also to Ann Grady and the Fallen Church Gun Violence Prevention Group for letting me speak. Thank you to Temple Amuna and the event co-sponsors. Thank you to Roman, Devesh, Tara, Jamie, Emily R, JJ, Charlotte, Eliza, Lucy, Annie, Cassidy, and the list goes on. And everyone that has become a part of this group. Everything that you do is helping this movement become a success and helping work towards our dream of peace and preventing gun violence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience being just like an advocate in terms of mental health. I mean, I have depression and anxiety, and I try to talk about that as much as possible because you have to be open. And also for preventing gun violence. So 9/11 happened 16 days before I was born. Apparently, I attended my first protest as a toddler and told a reporter, George Bush, boo, or something, I don't know. I really started to understand the value of this First Amendment and my freedom of speech when Donald Trump was elected. I've always believed in the phrase, if you don't believe in the way that something is being run, it's time you get up and show how you would run it. I want to be an activist when I grow up. I want to be someone that the children all around the world can look up to and say, I want to be like them. I feel kind of embarrassed for a president who has a toddler all the way across the nation saying, boo, in a response to their name. So my posters from some of the marches that I've been to are scattered around. And there's one that you can see, I'm not really sure where it went, but it says the shootings that have happened, some of the shootings that have happened at schools, and Lexington is at the bottom. And that's a sign that I never want anyone to hold up. And none of the other names should be on there. So, I'm sorry that I don't have my March for Our Lives poster. It's not up here, but I actually left it at the gates of the White House, so, I think that's a good place. I haven't experienced gun violence firsthand. And I realized that even if you haven't experienced something yourself, it's important to learn from those who have and help be a voice for them so that they're heard. When I heard about the Parkland shooting, I was originally going to say thoughts and prayers, because in many ways I thought that was enough, but I realize now that is not enough, and it will never be enough. And is it enough to glue back the pieces of a town that have been shattered by a series of bullets that have taken away the lives of innocent people? Is it enough to embrace the families who have not lost a victim, but a person, an individual with hopes, hobbies, passions, dreams, and aspirations, who might have really made a difference? Thoughts and prayers are not enough to bring about change in communities who have experienced mass shootings or communities that have experienced shootings every single day. The Parkland shooting happened on a day that was intended to be a day of love, not of hate. Since the shooting, my eyes have been open to the amount of hatred that is held within people, some of which who are young, bullied, and some who might appear helpless. But my eyes have also been open to the generation which I am blessed to call myself a part of. The millennials who are part of a generation who are labeled as self-absorbed and naive, but are really part of a group of people who are diverse, educated, united, unique, independent, and inspired individuals. I'm honored to be here right now speaking to you. I'm blessed to live in a community where for adults and other kids actually listen to you. And I'm also thankfully part of a community who has not experienced gun violence in a shooting or every day. And I take that for granted most days. And I'm sorry. And this is something that's really important to me, so. And we're not just Americans. We are what makes up America. We're the immigrants, the workers, the people that are going to bring about change and have brought about change, but we're going to continue to do it. So art, music, speaking, writing, rapping, anything you're passionate about can help spread your message. I started listening to rap music about 2 years ago, and I fell in love with the way that the words flowed off of the rapper's tongue. Rap is part of a culture that's been oppressed for centuries. Last year, I didn't understand the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'll admit, at first I said, don't all lives matter? And that's true, all lives matter, but that's not the point of the movement. The point of the movement is there's a group of people that are being oppressed and not being heard. So when I heard the song, White Privilege, the second version, by Macklemore, for the first time, I really didn't listen until I heard something that opened my eyes. We want to dress like, walk like, talk like, dance like, yet we just stand by. We take all we want from Black culture, but will we stand up for Black lives? So I used to say that I shouldn't walk for Black Lives Matter because what if people judge me? What if people say that I'm just there so I can pretend that I'm making a change? Why should I be involved with something if I haven't experienced it? Does showing up even though I haven't felt it mean that I'm not authentic? I never want to be seen that way. I should take a seat. But let me tell you, I was only able to take a seat because of my white privilege. The only reason I could sit down is because of the pigment of my skin. It wasn't because by posting thoughts and prayers I had made enough of a difference. It wasn't. It was because of the amount of melanin in my skin. And I guess the reason I didn't have to fight was because, I never guessed the reason I didn't have to fight was because of the many struggles that Dr. King fought for and how they're still around. Maybe they're not as public, but they're still around. The discrimination is still there. So it's past time for us to stand up, regardless of if it's your fight. If you believe in it, and if there's injustice anywhere, there's still injustice everywhere. So it's time to stand up and fight for a cause that we can all agree in, that everyone deserves to live. In early May, our plan is to host an event on the Battle Green, where over 200 years ago, we fought for a battle for freedom. Now it's our time to have our own revolution, to fight for peace, justice, and safety. The guns that we use today have changed over time. The way that we use them has changed. The way that we interpret the Second Amendment has changed. The value that we put on guns over human lives and the way that we think about safety needs to change. Speaking up against gun violence isn't going against the Constitution. It's following the central idea of the First Amendment. Here's what I ask of you. Students, speak up for what you believe in and educate yourself in what you believe is important. Understand that it's not our fault that there's gun violence, but if we want change, we can't expect it to happen. We make it happen. Adults, please don't tell your children that it's their responsibility to make change. It's not just about us. It's about everyone coming together. In my eyes, learning from others is what's going to make this movement successful. And we want to hear about you marching in Washington, D.C. in the 60s for peace. We want to hear about that, I swear. And as you can see, while the teens and children are the main voices behind this movement, there are so many supportive adults. Chaplain Jerry, you are making a difference in honor of your son, and I think we need to give her a round of applause. And same thing for my pal, right? For standing up for your friend. I think that's really important. And adults, you can support us. You can tell us your stories. I want to know how you think that this movement is different, or this version of the movement is different, and what you think is different about the way that we're approaching it, and why the momentum couldn't be held as much in the past. That's how we're going to make this dream of peace a reality, by working together.
Thank you so much. Before we transition to the Q&A, I just want to offer information on how you and your community can be involved in this year's 22nd annual Mother's Day Walk for Peace. This walk is the Peace Institute's most important fundraising event, and their goal this year is $400,000. In order to expand their critical services, training, and advocacy work. Having participated in the Peace Institute's Mother's Day Walk myself, it is an inspiring event. You are able to walk in solidarity with so many people from all of our local communities. You're able to make new connections as you walk, have conversations you would never have ordinarily had, and you're raising awareness. Maintaining a consistent and persistent message keeps this issue in the spotlight. Our goal is to have each of the co-sponsors of this program, create a team and encourage their members to donate and walk. And anyone can contribute and walk by choosing a team to support and paying a registration fee of just $10. 2018 will be the 6th year that Fallen Church has sent a bus full of people to the walk. There is information at a table in the lobby on the Peace Institute and how to register and start a team. Now, as we begin the question and answer period, if you haven't already, please pass your questions in to an usher. I have some here. But we're going to begin this Q&A with questions from 3 activists with Lexington Says Enough. These are going to be the only live questions. So please, our activists from Lexington Says Enough, please come on up. They have their own microphone from the floor.
That's weird. Hi, my name is Devesh. I am a part of the Lexington Says Enough movement, similar to Emily. And my question is more around gun culture is very much integral to American society at this point. There are a lot of gun owners and a lot of people work with guns recreationally, and ultimately, if we're going to create any kind of meaningful reform, they're going to be a part of the decision. And part of the goal of Lexington Says Enough itself is to prompt discussion. So what's the best way to bring these people to the table?
Hey, Ganesh, thank you so much for your question. Thank you for your activism and engagement. And it's a really important comment. I'll take it as a comment because I think it is an important comment about the need for inclusivity here. And, you know, I guess one thing I want to be clear about. I said at the outset, protections that are necessary for public safety and public health. It's not a zero-sum game. That's not mutually exclusive of the need to respect Second Amendment rights as set out in the Constitution. And I think that if you talk to the majority of law-abiding gun owners, they absolutely get that and support that. And they need to be part of this conversation. I mentioned Mark Kelly and Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, both gun owners. There are so many gun owners, part of important gun sense organizations all across this country, that are trying to speak out and really clarify the misinformation, the lies, and the really unfortunate ugliness promulgated by the gun lobby right now. And I think that law-abiding gun owners are so well situated to do just that. They deserve and absolutely need to be at the table for all of this. But remember, if you go back to the Constitution, if you go back to the Supreme Court decision Heller, which was the decision that governed the decision made by the judge here in Boston the other day, Justice Scalia himself said that the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. It is, quote, not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose. And I think that's why anybody who's been licensed to carry a gun in this state, anybody who's gone through the training and the process understands that there are limitations and supports that. To me, this is about keeping everybody's kids safe, everybody's community safe, and I think gun owners are an important part of that conversation. I appreciate your comment, Ganesh, and I think it's a really excellent point. Thank you.
And I just want to add to that, how do we get them? Start at your kitchen table. Start really just having a safe conversation and hearing people's stories. Tell me, why do you feel the need to carry? Everybody has that story. You heard Mikhail talking about for safety. Why do you feel the need to carry? And then shifting the paradigm. So instead of, we always want to shut people down, yet everyone has a story, good, bad, or indifferent. It's everybody's story. So your question is incredible, and it starts with you guys. It's not really just having conversation and hearing people's stories. Thank you.
And I think on that, whenever people want to stop something from happening, they always look to divide us, right? They set out to divide us. Look at what's happened in the last couple of years when it has come to electoral politics. I think this is another example of that. And I think that, there is a certain element and force there in the gun lobby that is trying to create two camps that frankly haven't existed in time, before. So we need to be strong and reject that as a proposition. The vast majority of Democrats and Republicans, the vast majority of Americans support common sense reforms. And that's what we need to embrace, is the inclusivity, see the commonality, and break through only by standing really, really strong and adamantly together efforts to try to suggest or paint a narrative that frankly isn't out there. It isn't, as I think is a real matter, as a practical matter, and it comes down to the conversations that Tina just spoke of.
Hi, I am Emily Rosenthal, and I'm an 8th grader at Clark. A number of students here have talked about how we can get the really young kids involved without scaring them, and I was wondering what suggestions any of you guys had for us.
So my suggestion would just be make it fun, make it interactive, make it fun where you're making it more so an activity instead of just a learning process. So within the activity, they're learning something constructive. Whether that's you guys picking a book and starting a book club, and after you guys read chapters 1 through 3, you guys give them an incentive. You guys take them to ice skating or something like that around those lines, and kind of just whatever you guys like to do, I guess. And so just take them out and just you feed them small incentives, but then slip the knowledge in underneath the door. That's a good way.
Also, we talked about doing the mural we talked about doing a mural at like the elementary schools so that they can like see that we're part of a community and we can incorporate art with the things that we're passionate about and also like about making a difference. And so I think that we're working on getting that approved, and we also might be able to paint a van, like part of a van, and kind of drive it around and maybe pass out some buttons, who knows. But yeah, like involving kids in a way that won't scare them would be kind of like not telling them like the scary things, but showing them that there's a community that's there to support them. And yeah, like what you said, slipping in the knowledge under the door. Good.
And also, amazing question, if you go on ldbpeaceinstitute.org and download Pathways to Peace. It's free, and it's really activities in engaging young people. We also have what's called Peace Zone curriculum that is for elementary school students, providing the teachers and the students with activities workbook. Young people, children, know what's going on. We, as adults, want to think and we want to be able to protect them. I'm sure you guys as teenagers know much more than your parents thought you knew, right? Right? Yeah. And you still know more than what your parents think you know at being teenagers. So I think if you just look at those activities, there are tools that are there for you. And as they said, ask the question, what does peace look like to you? What does peace taste like? Let them use their senses. What does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does peace smell like? And giving them the opportunity to help to create posters, letting them see what it looks like, and then finding a ways to even drawing. Art is healing. So we have to find a way of making peace the center of it all. And not because violence is going on, but make peace a part of the culture, a part of the foundation. And then, do you guys have Main Streets here? Do you have Main Streets? Well, then you work with your local businesses and you take those posters and you post them in their windows and you have town hall meetings and everybody is with their peace banners. And then, you know what you can do? Then you guys can use them at the Mother's Day Walk for Peace.
Thank you. Go ahead.
No, I'll add it in later. We're going to hear from you.
Well, I really appreciate that question and answer as a parent of an 8-year-old and 5-year-old, so thank you so much. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is James Picard. I am a member of Lexington Says Enough, and I go to Diamond Middle School in Lexington. So over the past couple months, we've seen an amazing amount of public action in the form of walkouts and mass protests and rallies and all these amazing things all across the country. But unfortunately, not a single bill regarding guns has passed the House of Representatives. So what I would ask is, what actions do you think we can take to affect change in this nature on a federal level?
What we did on Wednesday, I think it was the 14th, March 14th, was we went to lobby our representatives, and we can maybe get some buses next time and be able to take a bunch of people and have some key points, which is what we did when we lobbied them last time. And I think what the Somerville students are doing is they're going every single week. And if we can get something like that going, even if it's not every single week, by talking with them and kind of putting the pressure on, I think that will help a lot. So just by going down there and talking to them and showing them that we're not, like, we have our voice, and if they're not going to listen to us, then we're going to vote them out.
also want to add, just don't settle for no. A lot of the times, once people get told no once or twice, they kind of just they kind of retreat away and go back about their business. So don't settle for no, and just call your elected officials, your city officials, and just keep ringing the phone lines. And sometimes if that doesn't work, you guys sometimes there's been events where as an organizer, we showed up at meetings, and so like go inside these meetings. Sometimes sit down if you guys feel like your voice is not being amplified enough. Go into meetings with signs. If you have a speaker, go into meetings, let that speaker speak, and just say what you guys want. You guys want your voices to be heard, and you guys are frustrated. That's what it's about, really. And just not settling for no, and just knowing that you guys are going to push the change, and there's people behind you pushing you guys, and just really want to see you guys succeed. And just don't settle for no. That's the biggest thing.
And look, I think fundamentally we're not going to see any changes in federal laws until we vote people out. And so the effort, and that's why it's great. So many of the students you've heard speaking nationally talk about this as now a single issue. They're making single issue voters out there. They're registering people to vote. I think that's where the energy needs to be. Whatever you can do to help people in the fall elections so that we change the composition of Congress, we elect people who are going to stand for and support saving lives, and get out those who haven't been willing to stand to save lives, is where we got to be. But that doesn't mean, James, that you can't take action here. We're really lucky with a great federal delegation here, so they don't need to necessarily hear from you. But within our own state, though, there's proposed legislation. There's a few bills proposed that are red flag law equivalents, the extreme risk protection order legislation that will allow us to have on the books a law that will save lives by taking action and removing guns from those who are a danger to themselves or others. That's something that you can talk to your state legislators about. You can also talk to them about the need to support funding for public education, for civics, so that young people know how democracy works, how government works. For after-school programming, you think about Michael's comment about having basketball. I know we run out of my office an Anti-Violence Youth Summit basketball program every year, whether it's dance or theater or writing or sports. This programming is so important for young people. It's also really important that we support funding in schools for behavioral health services and the like, counseling. So those are things that you, James, and others can get involved with here on the state level, but keep the pressure on nationally. And sometimes it takes, sometimes the politicians follow. Oftentimes, unfortunately, they follow. But it was heartening to see so many Americans speak up, and the responses by investment firms saying, hey, we're going to look at this, is an issue here. People are upset. We're going to look at where our investments are right now. Retailers saying, we hear from people across this country, we're going to stop selling certain kinds of guns. That's powerful, and it's tied directly to you and others lifting your voices.
Thank you. We have about a dozen questions here. I'm not sure we'll have time for all of them. So I'm going to ask Roberta to give me a wave when you think when we have time for just one more question. So I'm going to start with this one from Sonia Coleman, and it's for the Attorney General. Congratulations on the court's decision to dismiss the NRA Goal lawsuit on Friday. We know it's important for Massachusetts, but what is the significance of this decision to our country?
A few things. This, as some of you may know, the history of this lawsuit. The day after the Orlando shooting, I went into the office and I asked my team if that kind of weapon was available for purchase here in Massachusetts. I didn't think it would be because we had an assault weapons ban on the books. But what I learned is that, in fact, the year before, 10,000 of those weapons had been sold in Massachusetts. And gun manufacturers had attempted to try to create a loophole in the law by selling certain copycat versions of banned weapons. And it was our position that the law was clear. The law banned certain AR-15 style weapons, but also banned copies and duplicates thereof. I sent out an enforcement notice to gun dealers and manufacturers, letting them know about the law and how we were interpreting it. And since then, the good news is that sales of illegal assault weapons have ended here in Massachusetts. And we've not had to prosecute or arrest anyone for violating that law, which I think speaks to the strength of the notice that we gave. But in response, what the NRA chose to do was file not one, but 2 lawsuits against me and the office, and petition very hard and lobby very hard, as you saw around the state the last couple of years. So Friday's decision was important because it again affirms what has been the principle, that there are limits the Constitution sets out certain limits, and one of the limits that the judge affirmed and made clear, using, of course, the precedent in place that he is required to follow in the Heller decision, made clear that assault weapons and large capacity magazines are outside of the scope of the Second Amendment. They are not protected by the Second Amendment. So if you're a state that wants to take action, like Massachusetts, and if the will of the people is to ban assault weapons or to ban large capacity magazines, you have every right under the Second Amendment as a federal constitutional matter to do so. And whether other states will take heed from that, we'll see. But that's why Friday's decision, I think, is important nationally, because it affirms, once again, basic constitutional principles and the prerogative of communities and states and the will of the people to set out what they think is best in terms of protecting the health and the safety of their residents.
Thank you. This is to anyone on the panel who has some advice for us. It's from Philip Kasdan. Marches and demonstrations have a place, but it seems that true effectiveness for gun violence prevention is at the polls. As mass citizens, how can we mobilize to defend NRA-supported candidates in red states?
You can take that.
No, I don't want to hog the time. First of all, this is an issue right now in Massachusetts, so make no mistake about it. Get familiar with what is happening within our own communities and all across the state, because there are candidates, including 2 running against me now, who are Second Amendment, the Second Amendment is really the basis for the run. And there are state rep seats and state senator seats that matter. And so find out how you can support those who are going to stand for saving lives, and not support those, defeat those who aren't willing to make that stand. That needs to happen right now in your community and in communities across this state. On the national level, you can get involved, whether it's going to volunteer or spreading the word or spreading treasure or time to make sure that you're doing all you can to help folks who are running in other places. And I think there are a lot of organizations out there that are involved in that effort. I think that there is now a growing recognition that this is a movement that's real. This is a movement that's real, and I think a lot more politicians, incumbents, are paying attention and mindful, and certainly those running are. And so I think there's a real opportunity. But look for some of the organizations that are working to support efforts in swinging districts, and just I think continuing to. You can do letters to the editor, you can write, you can blog, you can speak to this issue generally, and I think through the use of social media, you're obviously able to cross any number of geographic boundaries.
Also, social media is really great because I know that a lot of the teenagers and kids can spread news very, very fast. So we can post where the NRA's dollars are going. I know that there are a couple of forums out there, or just images where it shows where the money is going. And we can post that, and we can also encourage people that we're friends with to pre-register to vote, and tell them not just to pre-register, but also to show up to the voting, because that's important. So yeah.
And I think just to add to that, what you don't want to do is, again, slander people. As we're doing this, as we're trying to vote people out because of what they believe in. just making sure that we are not doing to them what they want us to do to us. Change can happen. And with you guys that are not registered to vote yet, pushing the people in your life that are registered to vote and making sure that they do get out. And then also finding ways of bringing people to the poll. Not everybody can make it to the poll. And many people would rather not vote because they can't make it than to ask for help. So being aware and knowing that we all have a way, and that change will happen. Change is here. Change is here. I feel it in my bones, and we're going to be where we want to be. It may be not in my lifetime, but change is going to happen.
Yeah. I have a really excellent question for Chaplain Sherry, without a name. Are there any efforts underway, can you speak to any efforts underway that you might know of, to demand accountability or to collect reparations for the enormous financial burden placed on society by gun violence?
That is another forum in its own. Thank you for that amazing question. Those are the things that we have been looking at for the past 24 years. What is the legal and financial responsibility? And then who is responsible for it? Again, in urban settings, when we talk about gun violence and we look at gun safety and gun control, it's really looking at the criminal justice aspect of it, where we invest in more police, swifter prosecution, and longer prison sentences, because it's Black and brown people being murdered or killing. So there's an economic aspect of it. The more murders in communities of urban settings is the more money that happens. So a while back, I was on a panel looking at with the lawyers committee and the legal and financial responsibility. Who is responsible? Who is being held accountable again when the flow of guns are coming in and when murder continues to happen? And for Black and brown kids, it's again those bad kids. When it's a white child shooting, their mental health and everything comes out. So it's still a long, it's when those of you who don't look like me begin to really ask that question and begin to invest in it. I think John Rosenthal says it well. I don't want to say the wrong name, but there's a supermarket, the owner of a supermarket, that's where the money is. And if we can not shop in those supermarkets and feel so that they are able to feel the financial pinch and the financial burden, yet someone has to be responsible, and there is a financial reparations. Again, we're still trying to get reparations from slavery, so we're not even going to look at that. One of the things that we did, and through the Attorney General's office support, is also change the clause in the state's victim compensation. And Massachusetts is always the leader in making changes. And so we know, thank you. You can clap, please clap. It made it into the criminal justice reform bill that I don't know if it's going to get signed by our governor, but you can call our governor also, where many states, the state's victim compensation is really to assist families financially to bury their loved ones and for mental health. And there is a clause that talks about if it deemed that the victim contributed to their own demise, then that money is not paid out to the families. With us here in Massachusetts, working with the Attorney General's office and many of the advocates in the room, all we wanted was for the clause to change burial, just the burial portion. So regardless of who that victim was, that family can bury their loved one with dignity and compassion. And that truly made it. And we are an example to the rest of the country, like we always are. And again, to the leadership and the support of the Attorney General's office in making that happen. So for us, that's a very small victory. And there's still a long way to go. So we like to start small.
question for Michael. It's a two-parter. What were your safe places growing up? And what can be done to expand and protect safe places for kids until we can break down the barriers and build equity for people who have historically been denied that equity and justice?
For me, I want to say my safe place, always been athletic. And so, starting off early elementary, my dad, he always, I live with a single father, so he was always aware of the situations going on in the community. He always tried his best to keep me out the streets, so he always put me in activities, and through the summer I would be in summer programs. I played in another group, a tennis thing called Tenacity, which is a program. So I played tennis, I played soccer, I played golf, I played football. So he kind of had me doing it all, really, and that was my safe space. A lot of the times that I was on the basketball court, when I used to get a dunk or I used to get a block, I let all my frustration out within that time period. Whether that was just me missing Thomas, some of the situations that I felt that I couldn't outrun in my community. So I feel like I really dug deep into sports. And so within doing that, I had the opportunity to go to live with a host family out in Lynn for 2 years from my junior and senior year of high school. So that gave me an opportunity. That gave me more of an opportunity to be in that safe space. I lived in a community where there was practically no violence at all. There was no violence. There was no shootings. It was so weird for me in a sense to say, because now I transitioned from an environment where I created peace for myself in a violent environment, and then I had transitioned over to an environment that was already peaceful. I really didn't need to create the peace. I just needed to sit there and enjoy it. And for me, that was kind of it was hard because I was so used to the chaos being around me that I created my own peace. And so now coming to an environment where I just, most of the times I heard birds and airplanes. So it was kind of weird, but it was like that enjoyment to kind of just be like a relief where I didn't have to sit here and think about who was coming in and out of my community, what friends that I might not see within the next week. And I was able to be myself, really. And so that's my safe space. And as far as creating a safe space, I feel like a community center. Living in Bromley, we had a community center for as long as I can remember. Right now, residents in my community, we don't have a community center. Our community center has been shut down for like the last 3 years. Most recently, there was a 16-year-old kid in my community on Halloween night. And so a lot of the times I think about those kids in my community now and what safe space are they in, or their thoughts and their feelings. Because now I know there's a kid out there that's going to potentially be a Michael or potentially be a John. And how do we catch that now and make sure that getting back to the quote, we make sure that the choices that they make are important and just realizing that it's going to have an impact on their future, and just being there, not being judgmental and just listening to what folks have to say. Once you're not judgmental, you kind of basically let all your judgments come out your head, and just you have an open mind, an open heart, and you're able to listen to the other person. With me sharing that story, I didn't want sympathy from folks. I wanted empathy. I wanted people to place themselves in my shoes or John's shoes or Thomas's shoes and kind of see like the destruction of where we came from, how we tried our best to survive in an environment, and how what was best for me I thought was best for me, and what John thought was best for him, it was best for him. Neither do I condone it or judge it, but I do understand it. And so just reaching out, really. A lot of us are afraid to reach out. We don't like talking about personal trauma that we've been through. I'd rather talk to a friend that's been affected by gun violence as such as myself, because it's more easier to relate in this, and they're not looking at you crazy thinking that you might have an issue. And so just really opening up and being who you are, and just thinking about what would you do if you was in that situation, and how would you want people to treat you, really.
Thank you so much, Michael. I think that's an incredible reminder in this community that is so privileged. How can we support in other communities, community centers, community sports programs, public libraries, things that create safe spaces for children? There were so many good questions. I really need to give one last question, and I'm going to open it up to the four of you. How do you handle people who disagree with you? A simple question like that.
Well, my experience, and it's been interesting the last couple of years because, I've been the subject of a fair amount of trolling and social media posts in opposition to the stance I took with respect to enforcing the laws. And it's been interesting. I've also done a lot of town halls all around the state, and sometimes people show up who disagree with the positions I take. It is really important to be able to listen. It is really important to be able to talk. And so, I remember this happened, I was in New Bedford, and I walked to the back of the room where there were people wearing things that explicitly said they disagree with the positions that I took. And that's okay. But I just walked to the back and I just had a conversation with them. I explained from my perspective why it was I took the position that I took. And I also said, to clarify, I wasn't interested in taking their guns away or undermining Second Amendment rights. I was doing my job to uphold the law and enforce the law, and that the law and the Constitution, in fact, allow for us as community to take steps to reduce gun violence. And so it's not everything goes. And we went back and forth. I probably didn't convince them. I'm glad we got the ruling we did the other day, and that's not from me, that's from a federal district court judge following U.S. Supreme Court precedent. But we got to be able to talk, and we got to be able to see our way through. And that's why I agree with what Tina says. You can't slam people, but you gotta, when it comes to the electoral politics, it's, look, if you're not for universal background checks, if you're not for allowing the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to study guns and gun violence, which essentially is currently prohibited, if you're not for repealing the T-Hart Amendment to make sure that law enforcement actually has an ability to talk and to share data and information, then we're not going to be with you. You're out, because you're not about saving lives. Those are common sense measures, things that we can do in every state, every community, all across this country that will make a difference, that in no way infringe on the Second Amendment. And, I just think the more we can be open to communication, it's where we have to be, and sometimes it's hard. I'll tell you, it's not always easy. But I think that that's absolutely where we need to be, and in that and through that, we find commonality. And I think fundamentally, I believe that every parent, I don't care what party they're in, fundamentally wants their child to be able to grow up and live, first of all, but to grow up and not fear for what might happen to them as they get on a bus or go to school or be at school or go to the movies or hang out at the mall. That's something that I think every parent agrees on. So how do we get there? And I think, my final point is that we have done things here in Massachusetts around public education, around support for healthcare, mental health services. We have more to do that matter. We need to support after-school programming. It's important that people pay their fair share here in the state because it's directly tied to results. It drives me nuts when people tell me they're socially liberal but fiscally conservative, and I want to respond that you just told me where your values are. This stuff matters. This stuff matters. So I'll end on that before I get myself in more trouble, but I'll always be open to dialogue. That's a wonderful thing about a democracy, and we'll continue to engage with one another.
Also, I've been in a therapy program called DBT, which is Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. And it basically tells you that there's a truth in both sides of an argument, and that it's time for you to find the kernel of truth in what the other person is saying. So regardless of if you believe in everything that they're saying, that there is something that has to be true within what they're saying. And so I've learned how to talk to people because of my therapy program, which is kind of ironic because I really didn't want to do it. But I've learned how to have political conversations and be respectful of other people's opinions, even if I don't agree with them. So I think saying that you are listening to the other person if you're in a discussion, and saying that you're listening to them and what you understand and might agree with, and also the things that you do not agree with, and telling them why you believe those things and giving them facts. So finding kind of a balance is something that's helped me talk to people. Sometimes you can't always please everybody, and that's something that you kind of have to accept. And if somebody isn't willing to listen to you, then it's time to move on and talk to somebody else.
Now we repeat the question.
Sure, yeah. How do you handle people who disagree with you? Don't have to answer.
So at the Peace Institute, we have some cultures and guidelines, and one of the things, let's agree to disagree. We agreeing right now that we're disagreeing on certain things. We can talk about it, and then I'm gonna pray for you.
And I guess so for me, I try to look at the situation from everyone's perspective. Earlier in the back, I had a conversation with another young brother, and we spoke about inclusion, and that involves everybody. We can't solve like one issue with just having a selected group of people within that room. It takes all of us, no matter your race, your age, your background, the language you speak, and that's how it takes all of us to break the barriers. And so within that, it just really what Emily said, respecting people's decisions, their mindset, but also knowing that you have a stance as well. And just morality, really, when we talk about humans, we're talking about people's lives, really. A lot of the times we look at people and see color. We forget about their soul. A lot of us as adults, we had dreams growing up as kids. We're so open-minded. I love speaking to youth, because their mind is so free and open to a lot of the things that we don't see as we get older. It comes, a lot of the media, our parents, people that we look up to that may influence our judgment and kind of cloud what's really in front of us. And so just looking at the person, so understanding who they are, stop looking at color, stop looking at your background, and just really morality. Where's your moral compass when it comes to human life issues and things like that, and just respecting one's opinion, but then also being firm on yours. Thank you, guys.
That is the end of our Q&A, and I think that we've all been impressed by the extraordinary work that young people across our country have been doing in the struggle to end against gun violence. So all students here who have been working on gun violence prevention, please stand. Thank our panelists for their time here today, their tireless work to help our country. Please join me in a very brief and inclusive closing blessing, closing words. May we together be instruments of life, people who stand with moral clarity against instruments of death. May we be consistent and persistent in our long walk towards justice. May we take heart, for we are not alone. Amen. And go in peace.